What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be another one of my case reviews, and in front of us we have the newly released micro ATX version of the Phanteks Enthoo EVOLV tempered glass case. Now there's already a few good thorough reviews of this case floating around out there, but since I do plan on doing a build in the very near future in this case, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the water cooling support in this case and maybe a few of the things that sort of set it apart from its big brother, the full ATX version of this case. Now the most obvious difference between the two is going to be the overall size. The micro ATX version is about the same width as the ATX version. However, it is almost 2 inches shorter and about 4 or so inches shallower than the ATX Big Brother. Now, compared to most of the other micro ATX form factor cases on the market, I would still consider this to be a little bit on the larger end of the spectrum, but the diminished size is still going to introduce some challenges when it comes to fitting a full custom loop into this particular case. Now, a few other key differences between the ATX version and the smaller one is the introduction of a latch on the panel to give it this sort of swing open door effect, which I think is pretty cool. It eliminates the obstruction of the screw mounts, although you do get the ones on the end, so I guess it's not really that big a deal. But it's a pretty neat look, and it's a much easier to open and close than the previous versions where you're unscrewing the screws off the panel. Another big difference is on the back side. We still have another tempered glass panel, still a door, but rather than being completely transparent like on the ATX version, this one has like a black silk screen on it, and the only portion of it that's visible is where your SSDs mount here. So, you know, I'm kind of indifferent about this. I guess I don't really care that much. I didn't mind having the visibility into the backside of the case, but I guess for a lot of people this is nice. They don't have to stress out as much about how clean their cable routing is. But I don't know. I guess maybe I did kind of prefer the other version where you could really showcase how nice your cables looked. But yeah, you know, I guess in the end, it's the backside of the case. Most people don't see it, so it's not really that big a deal. Now, while we're looking at the back here, we'll go ahead and go over the layout. You know, same side-by-side mounts for SSDs as on the larger version. You get the same sort of cradle for a couple hard drives that you did previously, but the obvious difference is you have much less room to work with here, and I would venture to say that anyone that's going to be doing any sort of water cooling in this case is not going to be using these trays here, because that's going to greatly reduce the amount of space that you have to work with. You also don't have that sort of bump in here to give you that additional depth for cable routing. However, there's still a pretty good amount of room to work with in here for cable routing, so I don't foresee any issues as far as that goes. Phanteks always does an excellent job considering all of these things. So yeah, I would say overall this is still going to be a pretty decent scenario for cable routing back here. Now, as far as the main chamber of the case goes, still looks like sort of a shrunk down version of the ATX version of the case. Now, you don't have that extra space between the shroud and the front of the case like you do on the fully ATX version, and I suspect that's where they've lost some of the width in this case. But according to Phanteks, this will support 280 or a 360 in the front, so we'll find out about that. I would trust that that's going to be the case. Up top, you no longer have the slide out tray to mount fans and radiators, although most people that were doing custom loops in this case weren't using that anyway, so that was kind of a nice feature for all-in-one. But for custom loops, I don't think people were really using that. But you should be able to pretty easily mount a 280, or not a 280, 240 up here. And it is set forward so that you won't obstruct the motherboard. And as you can see here from where your top mounts are, there's a good amount of space up here. So I think there's going to be a good support there. And then you can do a 120 or a 180 or 140 in the rear. So yeah. Now also keep in mind, this is only a 4-slot case. Some micro ATX cases are a 5-slot, but this one is not. So you do have a little bit less room to work with in this case than you may have in some of the others as far as, you know, the motherboard area. Now, according to Phanteks, in order to fully utilize the front mounts here, to use a 280 or a 360, you will have to pull this panel off and remove the drive trays from underneath. I think that's fairly obvious. But I suspect the biggest challenge in here is going to be the amount of space that you have to work with in the front before you start interfering with the motherboard and the cables and that sort of thing. That's going to become apparent as soon as we start getting some components in here. But I can tell right off the bat, that's where the main challenge is going to lie. And that's pretty normal for almost any micro ATX case. I ran into this sort of issue when I built in the Defined Mini C, so I'm no stranger to working in these sort of constricted spaces. But yeah, just to sort of point that out, it's going to be interesting to find out what's going to be the best sort of configuration to work in this case. So just out of curiosity, I went ahead and grabbed a ruler, and it looks like after your fans are installed and over to where the screw mounts are for the motherboard, where you've got about 75 millimeters to work with here, which isn't bad, really. I mean, I think that a 30 millimeter thick radiator is going to have no issues fitting in this case whatsoever. We could probably even go to 45. The only issue there is going to be cable routing, but even that I think is going to be doable. So I guess the next step is to go ahead and get some components installed in this case and get a feel for how everything fits and kind of go from there. Okay, so I had a chance to install some components in here now. And this is in no way indicative of the final build per se, but just to get an idea of how things are fitting in here with the you know, motherboard, graphics card, and all that stuff installed. I did some measuring, and 30 millimeter radiator is going to fit quite comfortably here. I think with the reference card, it's going to clear a 45 millimeter radiator by maybe just a millimeter or two, although I suspect that cable management would become a little bit difficult. It seems as though there's plenty of space down in the basement with this particular power supply here. It leaves me quite a bit of room to work with down there, so that's nice. And there is a ton of room at the top here. I measured from the bracket down, and easily there's 70 millimeters of clearance, so you could do fans plus a 45 mil radiator at the top. So it appears as though there's pretty decent you know, support here for water cooling. Now, with the small form factor cases, the thing you got to watch out for is it's not so much whether or not the radiators and the fans are going to fit, but the real challenge lies in determining where to put a pump and reservoir. So that, like many other small builds, is going to be the challenge here, but I think I've got some pretty good ideas. I would say overall, I think that Phanteks did a pretty good job of creating a nice micro ATX version of the very popular Enthoo EVOLV case. The only thing I would potentially change would be to maybe make the case just a tad bit longer. Even another 5 millimeters would be nice, just to give us a little bit more breathing room here, especially considering that this is a reference card and a lot of the other AIB cards are a little bit longer than this. So it'd be nice to have the peace of mind of knowing that you're going to be able to fit a radiator here regardless of which graphics card that you put in here. So I think another 5 to 10 millimeters in length would have been okay. It still would have been a good size case. I think it's a little bit awkward that the case is taller than it is long, just from a visual standpoint. You know, I would have been okay with it being just a hair longer. I don't think anyone would have complained about that, but still, I'm excited to get going on doing the custom loop in here. I think it's going to be nice. I'm really liking the case. I've got some really neat plans as far as some of the mods go, so stay tuned for that. But for the time being, I hope you guys were able to gain some valuable information in regards to being able to water cool in this particular case. I would say if anyone's considering it, I say go for it. I've had very pleasurable experiences building in these Phanteks cases. The quality is excellent. There's a lot of nice features built in that make it easy to build in as far as creating a nice clean look. So from the perspective of whether or not it's worth putting a small form factor build together in this case with water cooling in mind, I would say that this is a good choice for a case. So we'll know for sure soon, but that's my suspicion here, and I'm excited to build in this. So like I said before, stay tuned for the final water-cooled build that will eventually come to the channel. Don't hold me to any particular time frame, but hopefully I'll be working on this soon, and I will catch you guys in the next video.